Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius. Poem 5. Creator of the star-filled universe, seated upon your eternal throne, you move the heavens in their swift orbits. You hold the stars in their assigned paths, so that sometimes the shining moon is full in the light of her brother sun and hides the lesser stars. Sometimes nearer the sun she wanes and loses her glory. You ordain that Hesperus, after rising at nightfall to drive the cold stars before him, should change his role and, as Lucifer, grow pale before the rising sun. When the cold of winter makes the trees bare, you shorten the day to a briefer span. But when warm summer comes, you make the night hours go swiftly. Your power governs the changing year. In spring, Zephyrus renews the delicate leaves that Boreas, the wind of winter, had destroyed. And Sirius burns the high corn in autumn that Arcturus has seen in seed. Nothing escapes your ancient law. Nothing can avoid the work of its proper station. You govern all things, each according to its destined purpose. Human acts alone, O ruler of all, you refuse to restrain within just bounds. Why should uncertain fortune control our lives? Harsh punishment deserved by the criminal afflicts the innocent. Immoral scoundrels now occupy positions of power and unjustly trample the rights of good men. Virtue, which ought to shine forth, is covered up and hides in darkness, while good men must suffer for the crimes of the wicked. Perjury and deceit are not held blameworthy as long as they are covered by the color of lies. When these scoundrels choose to use their power, they can intimidate even powerful kings because the masses fear them. O God, whoever you are who joins all things in perfect harmony, look down upon this miserable earth. We men are no small part of your great work, yet we wallow here in the stormy sea of fortune. Ruler of all things, calm the rolling waves, and as you rule the immense heavens, rule also the earth in stable accord. Prose 5. While I poured out my long sad story, Philosophy looked amiably, quite undismayed by my complaints. Then she said, "When I first saw you downcast and crying, I knew you were in misery and exile, but without your story I would not have known how desperate your exile is. You have not been driven out of your homeland, you have willfully wandered away. Or, if you prefer to think that you have been driven into exile, you yourself have done the driving, since no one else could do it. For if you can remember your true country, you know that it is not, as Athens once was, ruled by many persons. Rather, it has one ruler and one king, who rejoices in the presence of citizens, not in their expulsion. To be governed by his power and subject to his laws is the greatest liberty. Surely you know the oldest law of your true city, that citizen who has chosen to establish his home there has a sacred right not to be driven away. The man who lives within the walls of that city need not fear banishment. But if he loses his desire to live there, he loses also the assurance of safety, and so I am not so much disturbed by this person as by your attitude. I do not need your library with its glass walls and ivory decoration, but I do need my place in your mind. For there I have placed not books, but that which gives value to books, the ideas which are found in my writings. What you have said about your merits in the Commonwealth is true, for many services deserve even more than you claim. And what you have said about the truth or falsity of the accusation against you is well known to everyone. You are right to speak sparingly of the crimes and deceit of your enemies. Such things are better talked about by the man in the street who hears about them. You have sharply protested the injustice done you by the Senate, and you have expressed sorrow for the accusations against me and the weakening of my place in the public esteem. Finally, you protested against fortune in sorrow and anger, and complained that rewards are not distributed equally on the grounds of merit. At the end of your bitter poem, you expressed the hope that the same peace which rules the heavens might also rule the earth. But because you are so upset by sorrow and anger, and so blown about by the tumult of your feelings, you are not now in the right frame of mind to take strong medicine. For the time being, then, I shall use more gentle treatment, so that your hardened and excited condition may be softened by the gentle handling, and thus prepared for more potent remedies. Poem 6. The fool who plants his seed in the hard ground when summer burns with the sun's heat must feed on acorns in the fall, because his hopes of harvest is in vain. Do not look for violets in purple meadows when fields are blasted by winter winds, and do not cut your vine branches in the spring if you want to enjoy the grapes, for Bacchus brings his fruit in autumn. God assigns to every season its proper office, and he does not permit the condition he has set to be altered. every violent effort to upset his established order will fail in the end. Prose 6. First, philosophy said, will you let me test your present attitude with a few questions, so that I can decide on a way to cure you? Ask whatever you like, I replied, and I will try to answer. Do you think, she began, that this world is subject to random chance, or do you believe that it is governed by some rational principle? I cannot suppose that its regular operation can be the result of mere chance. Indeed, I know that God the Creator governs his work, and the day will never come when I can be shaken from the truth of this judgment. That is true, philosophy answered. And you said as much in your poem a while ago when you deplored the fact that only men were outside God's care. You did not doubt that all other things were ruled by reason. Strange, isn't it, that one who has so healthy an attitude should be so sick with despair? You must search further because obviously something is missing. Tell me, since you have no doubt that the world is ruled by God, do you know how it is governed? I don't quite get the point of your question, so I am unable to answer. You see, I was right in thinking that you had some weakness, like the breach in a wall of a fort, through which the sickness of anxiety found its way into your soul. But tell me, do you remember what the end or goal of all things is, the goal toward which all nature is directed? I heard it once, I answered, but grief has dulled my memory. Well, do you know where all things come from? I answered that I knew all things come from God. How then, she went on, is it possible that you can know the origin of all things and still be ignorant of their purpose? But this is the usual result of anxiety. It can change a man, but it cannot break him and cannot destroy him. I want you to answer this. Do you remember that you are a man? How could I forget that, I answered. Well then, what is a man? Can you give me a definition? Do you mean that I am a rational animal and mortal? I know that, and I admit that I am such a creature. Do you know nothing else about what you are? No, nothing. Now, I know another cause of your sickness, and the most important. You have forgotten what you are, and so I am fully aware of the reason for your sickness and the remedy for it too. You are confused because you have forgotten what you are, and therefore you are upset because you are an exile and stripped of all your possessions. Because you are ignorant of the purpose of things, you think that stupid and evil men are powerful and happy. And because you have forgotten how the world is governed, you suppose that these changes of your fortune came about without purpose. Such notions are enough to cause not only sickness but death, but be grateful to the giver of health that nature has not entirely forsaken you. For you have the best medicine for your health in your grasp of the truth about the way the world is governed. You believe that the world is not subject to the accidents of chance, but to divine reason. Therefore you have nothing to fear. From this tiny spark the living fire can be rekindled. But the time has not yet come for stronger remedies. It is the nature of men's minds that when they throw away the truth, they embrace false ideas, and from these come the cloud of anxiety, which obscures their vision of truth. I shall try to dispel this cloud by gentle treatment, so that when the darkness of deceptive feeling is removed, you may recognize the splendor of true light. Poem 7. Stars hidden by black clouds send down no light. If the wild south wind turns up the sea, the waves, which were once clear as glass, as clear as the bright days, seem muddy and filthy to the beholder. The flowing stream, tumbling down from the high mountain, is often blocked by the stone broken off from the rocky cliff. So it is with you. If you want to see the truth in clear light and follow the right road, you must cast off all joy and fear, fly from hope and sorrow. When these things rule, the mind is clouded and bound to earth. Book 2, Prose 1. Philosophy was silent for a while, then regaining my attention by her modest reserve, she said, if I understand the cause of your diseased condition, you are suffering from the absence of your former good fortune. What you regard as a change has greatly upset you. I am well acquainted with the many deceptions of that monster fortune. She pretends to be friendly to those she intends to cheat, and disappoints those she unexpectedly leaves with intolerable sorrow. If you will recall her nature and habits, you will be convinced that you had nothing of much value when she was with you, and you have not lost anything now that she is gone. But I do not suppose that I have to labor this point with you. When fortune smiled on you, you manfully scorned her and attacked her with principles drawn from my deepest wisdom. But every sudden change of fortune brings with it a certain disquiet in the soul, and this is what caused you to lose your peace of mind. Now is the time for you to take some gentle and pleasant remedy which may prepare you for a stronger medicine. I shall use the sweet persuasion of rhetoric, which is suitable enough if it does not contradict the truths of philosophy, and I shall add the grace of music, a servant of mine whose songs are sometimes happy and sometimes sad. What is it, my friend, that has thrown you into grief and sorrow? Do you think that you have encountered something new and different? You are wrong if you think that fortune has changed towards you. This is her nature, the way she always behaves. She is changeable, and so in her relation with you, she has merely done what she always does. This is the way she was when she flattered you and led you on with the pleasures of false happiness. You have merely discovered the two-faced nature of this blind goddess. Although she still hides herself from others, she is now wholly known to you. If you like her, abide by her conditions and do not complain. But if you hate her treachery, ignore her and her deceitful antics. Really, the misfortunes which are now such a cause of grief ought to be reasons for tranquility. For now she has deserted you, and no man can ever be secure until he has been forsaken by fortune. Do you think that your lost happiness is a precious thing? Can present good fortune be dear to you, even though you know that you may lose it, and that the loss will bring sorrow? If you cannot keep her, and if it makes you miserable to lose her, what is fickle fortune but a promise of future distress? It is not enough to see what is present before our eyes. Prudence demands that we look to the future. The double certainty of loss and consequent misery should prevent both the fear of her threats and the desire of her favors. Finally, once you have submitted yourself to her chains, you ought to take calmly whatever she can do to you. If you were to wish for a law to control the comings and goings of one whom you have freely taken for your mistress, you would be unjust, and your impatience would merely aggravate a condition which you cannot change. If you hoist your sails in the wind, you will go where the wind blows you, not where you choose to go. If you put seeds in the ground, you must be prepared for lean as well as abundant years. You have put yourself in fortune's power, now you must be content with the ways of your mistress. If you try to stop the force of her turning wheel, you are the most foolish man alive. If it should stop turning, it would cease to be fortune's wheel. Poem 1. When fortune turns her wheel with her proud right hand, she is as unpredictable as the flooding Euripus. At one moment she fiercely tears down mighty kings, at the next the hypocrite exalts the humbled captive. She neither hears nor cares about the tears of those in misery. With a hard heart she laughs at the pain she causes. This is the way she amuses herself. This is the way she shows her power. She shows her servants the marvel of a man despairing and happy within a single hour. Prose 2. Let me confront you with arguments of fortune herself, then you will see that she is right. She might say to you, "Why do you bother me with your daily complaints? What have I taken from you that belong to you?" You may argue your case against me before any judge, and if you can prove that riches and honors really belong to any mortal man, I will freely concede your ownership of the things you ask for. When nature produced you from your mother's womb, I found you naked and lacking in everything. I nourished you with my abundant gifts, and being inclined to favor you, an attitude which you now seem to hold against me, I endowed you with all the affluence and distinction in my power. Now it pleases me to withdraw my favor. You should be grateful for the use of things which belong to someone else. You have no legitimate cause for complaint, as though you lost something which was your own. Why then are you so sad? I have done you no injury. Riches, honors, and all good fortune belong to me. They obey me as servants obey their mistress. They come with me, and when I go, they go too. I would even say that, if the things which you complain about losing had really been yours, you would never have lost them. Why should I alone be deprived of my rights? The heavens are permitted to grant bright days, then blot them out with dark nights. The year may decorate the face of the earth with flowers and fruits, then make it barren again with clouds and frost. The sea is allowed to invite the sailor with fair weather, then terrify him with storms. Shall I, then, permit man's insatiable cupidity to tie me down to a sameness alien to my habits? Here is the source of my power, the game I always play. I spin my wheel and find pleasure in raising the low to a high place and lowering those who are on top. Go up if you like, but only on the condition that you will not feel abused when my sport requires you fall. Didn't you know about my habits? Surely you had heard of Croesus, king of Lydia, who was a formidable adversary to Cyrus at one time and later suffered such reverses that he would have been burnt, had he not been saved by a shower from heaven. And you must have heard how Paulus wept over the calamities suffered by Perses, king of Macedonia, whom he captured. Why else does the cry of tragedy bewail but the overthrow of happy realms by the unexpected blow of fortune? You must have learned as a boy that on Jupiter's doorstep there are two barrels, one holding good things, the other bad. What if you have drawn more abundantly from the barrel of good things? What if I have not deserted you completely? What if my very mutability gives you reason to hope that your fortunes will improve? In any case, do not lose heart. You live in a world which all men share, so you ought not to desire to live by some special law. Poem 2. If free-handed plenty should dispense riches from her cornucopia as plentiful as the sands cast up by the storm-tossed sea, or as the stars that shine in heaven on clear nights, men still would not stop crying their miserable complaints. Even though God were overgenerous with treasures of gold and deigned to satisfy every plea, if he favored the ambitious with the greatest honors, still all this would not satisfy. Ravenous greed would devour everything, and then discover other wants. No bridle can restrain man's disordered desires within reasonable bounds. Even when he is filled with great favors, he burns with thirst for more. No man can be rich who cries fearfully and considers himself to be poor. Prose 3. If fortune should argue her case in this way, you would be unable to answer her. But if you do have something to say in support of your complaint, I will be glad to listen. You have made a persuasive argument, I replied, and presented it with sweet music and rhetoric, but it satisfies only while it is being spoken. Those in misery have a more profound awareness of their afflictions, and therefore a deep-seated pain continues long after the music stops. You are quite right, philosophy answered, for these words are not supposed to cure your disease, but only to kill the pain of your obstinate sorrow. At the proper time I shall apply a more deeply penetrating medicine. Still, you ought not to consider yourself completely miserable if you recall your many great joys. I will not mention that when you lost your father, you were adopted by a very prominent people and were chosen to become closely associated with the most powerful figures in your city. You soon were more dear to them by love than you had been close before by relationship. And that is the most precious bond. Everyone considered you most fortunate to have so noble a father-in-law, such a chaste wife, and such fine sons. Pass over such trivial things as the fact that in your youth you received honors which most men never achieve, even in old age. But I want to stress the greatest of your joys. If any mortal achievement can make a man happy, is it possible that any amount of misfortune can dim the memory of that brilliant occasion when you saw your 2 sons made consuls and carried from their house in the company of the senators and acclaimed by the people? They sat in the Senate in the chairs of consulship while you made a speech in honor of the king, which earned high praise for its wit and elegance. You stood between your 2 honored sons and surpassed the expectations of the great crowd with your triumphant generosity. You pledged yourself to fortune while she pampered you and favored you with her gifts. You got more from her than any private citizen ever received. And now do you think you can bargain with her? This is the first time she ever frowned on you with her evil eye. If you balance the number and kinds of your joys and misfortunes, you must admit that up to now you have been a happy man. If you think yourself unfortunate because you have now lost the things which seemed to make you happy before, still you should not make yourself miserable because this sorrow will also pass. Do you imagine that you have come on the stage of life as an unexpected pilgrim? Surely you do not expect to find stability in human affairs, since the life of man himself is often quickly ended. Although it is true that things which are subject Although it is true that things which are subject to fortune can hardly be counted on, nevertheless, the last day of a man's life is a kind of death to such fortune as he still has. What difference does it make then whether you desert her by dying, or she, you, by leaving? Poem 3. When Apollo in his rosy cart begins to spread light across the sky, the stars grow pale and fade before the rushing flame. When the warm west wind blows, the woodland is radiant with spring roses, but the rage of the cold east wind can blast their beauty and leave only thorns. The calm sea often gleams in serene stillness, but often, too, angry storms out of the north throw up huge waves. If the form of this world cannot stay the same, but suffers so many violent changes, what folly it is to trust man's tumbling fortunes, to rely on things that come and go. One thing is certain, fixed by eternal law: nothing that is born can last.